It's a strategic relationship that has shared interest and ambition, not just for the two countries, but also for the region of the Indo-Pacific to make it a stable, prosperous region. A lot of the focus has been on defense in terms of the defense ties that have been focused on maritime cooperation through joint exercises such as the Malabar exercise, which includes Japan, US, Indian, and Australian navies, but also of the Oz Index, which includes just the Australian and Indian navies. Overall, there's a massive impetus in increasing interoperability between the two countries, and that includes sort of joint training exercises and shared military platforms. Overall, sort of increasing maritime cooperation for the two countries to help stabilize the region.
Given
But
the,
what
if I can just stop you there, because there's a lot in what you just answered there, given the shifting geopolitical sands that we're seeing in the United States, in Europe and in China, etc., just how important is the relationship when it comes to stability in the Pacific region?
Look, it's very, very important given the fact that there is now a lot of global uncertainty in the balance of power within the region. And Australia and India not just act together in their bilateral forms, but also come together as the Quad partners with Japan and the US. So it's more of a joint responsibility that they provide a fulcrum almost to the region to balance the power dynamics. And it's not just defense, right? They also have a very strong economic and trade relationship that they are now strengthening. So the first phase of the FTA, of the ECTA, the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement that was signed when the Labour Party came in 2022, which is now going to save Australian exporters almost $2 billion at the end of this year, is nothing to sneer at as well. So the economic ties are gaining strength as well, given the geoeconomic uncertainties in the region. So I think it's a wholesome relationship that not only caters to each other, but also the whole region, as it were.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about the economic ties and the ECTA and the FTA that you just touched on. But before we move away from defence, you spoke of the Quad there. We know that that is a quadrilateral security dialogue between Australia, India, Japan and the United States. Where does it leave it, given that we have seen the incoming second Trump administration, given that the US is part of that quadrilateral relationship?
Look, I think the support for Quad, even in the Trump 2.0 administration, is paramount because I think the US, Washington in particular, realizes how important this region is to their interests. And all of their sort of tariffs and economic sort of statecraft is geared towards the same sort of reason why Quad came into existence, which is to create a stable Indo-Pacific order. And that has to include security as well as sort of the economic well-being of the region. So I think it's while there are a lot of other uncertainties, but the Trump administration still sees this as top priority.
Yeah. Moving to trade, and then I'll just finish off with challenges. India is Australia's fourth largest export market. It's our fifth largest trading partner. I believe two-way trade totals around $49-50 billion. We have that free trade agreement in place, but negotiations have resumed for quite an ambitious, comprehensive economic cooperation trade agreement, which has to be built on. Where is that at, and what could it unlock?
Look, so the first phase of the FTA has already been implemented. And at the end of 2025, it will be fully operational. However, sort of the second half of the agreement, which will then make it a comprehensive agreement, is currently still in talks. And of course, with the current sort of tariff talks that are happening globally, there's still a lot of ground to cover in terms of what that will mean for the agricultural sector, specifically for both Australia and India. And those are two sectors that both Australia and India protect. So that's a small little speed bump that they'll have to overcome. But I'm sure that through bilateral negotiations, that is possible.
Yeah, and just finally, Teesta, I want to ask you about the challenges. We haven't really discussed those. What do you see as the major challenges? One, of course, which I think would be obvious to many, is looking at our relationship through the lens of India's relationship with Russia.
Look, that's a strategic impediment that Australia already recognizes in even engaging with Australia in information sharing on Quad and otherwise. However, I think there is a maturity in the relationship that has taken over, that is no longer a massive speed bump that it used to be, say in the Cold War years, where India was seen as a closer partner to the USSR than it is now. India is diversifying its defense portfolio with increasing sort of engagements with the US, with France, with more like-minded allies of Australia as well. So I think there's a lot more room now for there to be discussions on where India stands as a trustworthy and reliable strategic ally to Australia.
Teesta Prakash, Academic Fellow at the Australia India Institute, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.